are both licensed professional counselors, right? I
Right.
was pretty sure. I was trying to remember because I have other counselor friends that are social workers or whatever. But um, tell me your journey. We all have a counseling journey. That what led us here. So tell me what led to you being a professional counselor.
Yeah. I remember being in graduate school and a guest lecturer came to one of our classes and said, no child grows up and says, I want to be a therapist. Like all therapists have stories. So mine is similar to a lot of therapists. I think I grew up in a really dysfunctional family and we were sort of long on love and short on emotional maturity. My parents were I think overwhelmed. There were a lot of kids. I'm the fourth of four. So my mother was an immigrant from Colombia, South America, and my dad was second generation Italian. And, survival was the name of the game. They didn't really have an understanding of emotional health. They certainly didn't know that you're supposed to feel your feelings and express them emotionally. So in my family, feelings were felt and then acted out. So it was, Colombian and Italian. There's a lot of hot blood. There was a lot of explosive fights. There was a lot of screaming. And both of my parents had trauma on both sides of their family that they unknowingly, certainly unintentionally passed down. They passed down their trauma. They passed down their coping mechanisms. I think they did better than their parents, but there was no healing. There was no understanding of mental health. So I grew up in survival mode. I had every kind of emotional PTSD. I had some physical PTSD from physical abuse. So, it's just that dysfunctional family system. I was the youngest child. So I played the mascot role with my mom. Well, with my whole family. I think I was in a lot of ways my mother's hero. I was like her trophy child and I was my dad's scapegoat. So a lot of yelling, a lot of blaming, a lot of getting out his frustration and I think just being overwhelmed with the family onto me, and they sort of created the system that wound up overwhelming them unknowingly again. And so I grew up and sort of adopted those roles. I understood that my value came from my performance and I was really hard on myself, which is the scapegoat role, but I had a ton of anger. So I go to NYU and I'm having a lot of success and I'm booking commercials and television shows and movies and I'm, working off Broadway on stage by the time I'm a senior. So I'm doing really well, but there's this double life that I'm living. On the outside, I'm this, sort of shining star of a performer. And on the inside, I'm deeply insecure. I lied just as easily as I could tell the truth back in those days. So I joined a campus ministry. I grew up Adventist, Seventh day Adventist, if you're familiar with that tradition.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
lots of rules, lots of structure. And I think that worked really well for my parents. I think they wanted rules and structure. But I didn't remember, and I still don't remember ever growing up learning that God loved me. I knew that God was watching me, and I knew that God had standards and expectations of holiness. Just keeping it light, for a 7-year old, that was kind of intense. But I didn't know that like I was loved. That wasn't part of the theology that I was taught. I was taught that you owe God this obedience. So I go to NYU in my first year. I basically went hog wild. I don't think I went to church maybe one time my freshman year, but I got drunk every weekend and I'm living in Manhattan and I'm 17 years old. So use your imagination. And then the beginning of my sophomore year, I'm feeling really guilty. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to spend another year like that. So right around that time, I got invited to this Bible study in my dorm room. And so I go to that and I join this campus ministry. And long story short, it turns out to be like a Christian cult. So my spiritual formation is disastrous at this point. Like I don't have any experience of grace. I don't have any experience of like calm, really. I mean, all of my spiritual, and this is sort of, goes hand in hand. So I leave that church. I remember I walked out into Union Square Park, which is right at 14th Street and kind of a block away from Fifth Avenue in New York. And I remember just walking outside of my dorm. I was about 20. Well, I might have been a little bit older because I was not living in the dorm at that time. I was in my early 20s and I put my hand up like to heaven and said, leave me alone. Do not come after me. I'm done. And I was done. And I stopped going to church and I started reading all of the atheists of that time, like Richard Dawkins and Christopher
Mhm.
Hitchens and Sam Harris. And like I'm flooding my mind with there is no God. And of course, there's no
Mhm.
God. And it's starting to make sense, except that Dawkins really doesn't make sense. It's logically really flawed. That book is really logically flawed. But I'm still searching for truth. I moved to Europe. I was in the cast of West Side Story, the European tour. I'm playing Maria. So I'm like living this dream role, and I'm
Wow.
reading The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And right around that time, I made a phone call to a therapist because I was in a pretty dark place. Again, there was an inner and an outer Vanessa. The outer Vanessa was like the starry eyed performer, and the inner Vanessa was tormented. So I left a message on this therapist's voicemail and I said, hello, my name is Vanessa Landino and I need someone to call me back. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself. And she called me back within hours and she said, why don't you come in today? And that was the
Wow.
beginning of therapy for me. So I went and saw Mary Coonan in New York City. I want to send this to her if she's still around. And she was the first person in my life ever who showed me compassion.
Wow.
Um, and she was the first human who didn't objectify me. There was a lot of narcissism in my family growing up. So there was just so much objectification. I was not a person. I was my mother's trophy. I was
Mm.
the reason she was succeeding as a mother because I'm this bright star that's going places. And so I go to see Mary, and I think I spent the first 6 months in therapy just weeping, like weeping and crying, probably 22, 23 years of tears at that time. And
Yeah.
she was so patient and so kind and so comforting, and she was motherly. And
Mm.
you know I told her I'd left the faith, and she was like, okay, what did you leave? I mean, she just had all these great questions. They weren't shame based. I was allowed to explore things. And then we started talking about my family of origin, and she started calling a spade a spade. And she was like, that's narcissism. That was abuse. And I remember telling her, because, my mother was old school and she would whip me with a leather belt when I was, disappointing or bad or whatever. And I remember telling my therapist this, and this was such a seminal moment in therapy. And she said, Vanessa, that's physical abuse. And I remember in denial, protecting the family system, which is the role of the hero child, right? I was like, no,
Mhm.
no, no, no. That she's just old world. It's Colombian discipline. And she was like, no, that's physical abuse. And so slowly I'm starting to learn that I have rights and that I had rights and that a lot of those rights were validated. So fast forward, I moved to Europe. We did therapy over email at that time because we didn't have Zoom and I couldn't call her.
Uh-huh.
So she's giving me therapy over email. But I wanted to keep doing therapy. And so I'm searching every spiritual tradition you can imagine. I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita. I'm even reading the Quran. I'm reading Buddhism. I'm reading New Age mysticism. I'm reading everything and I'm searching for truth. And I can't find all of it, but I'm getting pieces of it. So I come back to the States after having broken every commandment, literally every commandment. People are like, how did you murder? I'm like, I have had an abortion. Like, I have broken every commandment. I've done everything I swore I'd never do. And I come back to the States, and best thing you could do at this time, get married. So I got married, and that was a very, very troubled marriage, and it only lasted 5 years. But at the end of that marriage, the only thing I could describe was I began to hear a voice within me that was bigger than me. And I knew it was bigger than me. And I was so open. My heart was open, my mind was open. I just wasn't open to Christianity because I had taken that off the list of where truth lives. So I'm still in therapy. I'm still doing all this healing work. Now that I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy was cognitive behavioral and she was psychodynamic. Like I'm finally
Uh-huh.
learning like what now I know what they were doing with me. But at the time, all I knew is that I was being heard
Right.
and my pain mattered. And it never mattered in my home, but it mattered now. And so I'm developing what therapists call ego strength. I'm developing self respect for the first time in my life. I'm developing self confidence. And right around that time, I hear this voice in my head. I don't know if it was in my head. It was a sense I had within me that I was connected to something bigger. That's the best way I could put it.
Mhm.
That my life was part of this, like the energy of the universe, and I'm connected to a bigger thing. But again, Christianity's way, like, I'm like, no, that's not what this is. And so I start kind of paying attention to this sense within me that I'm connected to the larger energy. Okay. And I'm noticing that like I'm made of the same stuff as trees and plants and flowers and animals. And like it's all energy, it's all atoms. We're all part of this energy field. And so I'm getting into that sort of spirituality and that kind of like,
Mhm.
new age spirituality. And then at one point I was sort of like, God, is that you? And what I heard, felt, sensed, whatever was, it is me. It's always been me. I've always been here. Come home, Vanessa.
Mhm.
I could cry. I mean, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, here I am. I am the woman who's lived the sinful life in that town. Like whenever I read
Uh-huh.
this, a woman who had lived a sinful life in that town, I'm like,
Yeah.
that would be me. So I, at that time, I didn't believe in prayer. Christianity was off the table. I did not believe in prayer, but I was thinking, but I was kind of thinking upwardly. So I used to call this prinking. Like I'm not praying, I'm not thinking, I'm prinking. And so I prunked. I prunked. Um, anyway, I was pranking myself, but we could go down that road. So I'm pranking. And I remember sort of like, there is a God, and this is it. It's being connected to the being, the energy, the source of everything that is. And that was like the first conversion. And it was very real. And it also made sense with everything I'd been studying. You know, the laws of the laws of physics support the existence of God. Like there is an energy field and we are all part of it. And so all of these things that I've been studying, and I was reading quantum physics at that time. I was reading for fun. I mean, it was a
Just
time of
light,
learning.
just light reading, nothing
You know,
big.
I didn't get a lot of it, but I was trying. I was searching, and so then I remember, and this all kind of goes together because this whole time I'm in therapy, and I thought when I left the church and got into therapy, without realizing it consciously, I was sort of like, this is where love lives. Love lives in a therapist's office. Healing is in a therapist's office. Like I thought therapy was the safe place
Mhm.
because no one was hurting me there. And my family wasn't safe and the church wasn't safe because I had been spiritually abused in this campus ministry and the Adventist church. I have nothing against Adventism at this time at all. I have so much gratitude for the way I was raised at this time. But then it just felt like rules. Like
Mhm.
that's not healing. I don't need more rules. So I'm having a healing interaction in a therapist's office. And then here comes God back in my life. And then I remember saying, okay, at this point, God, I'm a deist. Like, I believe you exist, but I don't believe in Jesus. So if you're cool and I'm cool, I can live out my whole days, like all of the days of my life as a deist. I love this. I love you. You love me. I believe I'm in the love now. Who needs Jesus? And but I was actually asking the question. My heart was genuinely saying, if Jesus is real, you're going to have to teach me about it because I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to Christianity, not the way I know it. And what I heard, again, sensed when you're in communication with the divine, it doesn't work in the five senses all the time. But what I sensed was go back to the Gospels. And so I opened John, which is probably still my favorite Gospel.
Uh-huh.
And all the old condemning voices start up in my head. Like I'm reading this, and all I'm reading is, you're not good enough. You're not worthy to be his follower. Jesus would never even spend 1 minute with you. Like all of the old condemning voices are, and I shut the Bible, I slammed it shut. And I remember this day so well. I was like, I can't do this if I can't read this. Give me new eyes.
Mhm.
And I opened up to the same page again. It was John 4. It was the woman at the well, who I
Mhm.
totally relate to.
Yeah.
And it was like the words were jumping off the page. Like I have I've never been able to forget that day reading the Bible. It was like I could see the spiritual truth in it. I was understanding things that I had never understood before. And that was the day that started my conversion as a follower of Jesus. I was already like on board with God, but I again had rejected the church and the faith. And then as I kept reading and kept reading his words over time, all of the tidbits of truth that I had found along the way. And all of these other books and sources, they all contain truth. What I realized is Jesus is the culmination of them. Jesus is the
Yes.
holder of all of it. Like Jesus is the speaker of all truth. And I was like, how did I miss this? It's all here. It's all in one person, you know.
Yeah.
And then connecting that as like the incarnation of God and giving us the secrets of the kingdom and the secrets of just the ways of life and the secret of who you are as a person. Like all these mysteries are being revealed, and then they were being revealed to me. So again, this whole time I'm in therapy, but therapy feels like the healing place. And now I'm getting converted over here. And then finally, I had dinner with a couple who were like incredibly strong Christians. And also, I trusted them because they were therapists. I had to have both, right? And I remember her name is Sherry Tilley, and she's one of the most magnificent teachers and one of the most humble humans I've ever met in my life. But I remember having dinner with them at my house in Nashville. And I told them this whole story in whatever version I told them then. And I remember she said to me, Vanessa, this made me cry. She said, God will never abuse you. And like that was the moment that I realized that I can do this and be that. And I needed that whole thing to come together before I could ever become a therapist. So that by that time I'm in graduate school, and I flew through graduate school, 3 class. I mean, I tripled up on my curriculum, flew through, got licensed, opened my private practice, and a supervisor, I'll just sum up this part of the story with this. A supervisor said to me very early on in my training, he said, Vanessa, you don't sit down with therapists, like you, as in you, Vanessa. He's like, you don't sit down with clients. That's not what you do. You sit down and you battle the darkness. And I would say that's true. And I would say that the reason why I do and I want to and I'm energized and I'm called to is because I've battled it in myself. In very real ways in a therapist's office. I mean, therapy was the safe place for me for a long time. So that's how I became a therapist.